5 unopened condoms spilled onto the leather seat of my husband's car. Beside them, a smear of red lipstick mocked me, a shade I had never worn in my life. After 45 years of marriage, that was all it took to shatter my world. I stood in my kitchen, staring at the evidence, whispering through clenched teeth, 45 years. I gave him 45 years. That morning, I knew the illusion of our perfect marriage was over. For most of my 67 years, I believed in the picture-perfect life Robert and I had built. We married when I was barely out of college, raised our son David in this quiet Georgia neighborhood. And for decades, we were the couple everyone looked up to. Reverend Evans would beam whenever we walked into church together. Neighbors would whisper, "There go Bob and Carol, marriage goals." Once, a local newspaper even ran a small feature on us for our 40th anniversary, calling us a testament to enduring love. I had clipped the article and tucked it away in an album, proud of the life I thought we shared. But that morning, staring at those 5 condoms, all I felt was humiliation. The night before, Robert had told me he was heading out for a late fishing trip. He had dusted off the old tackle box from the garage and even muttered about picking up live bait. I remember smiling, thinking it was sweet that he still clung to that hobby. But when I went to grab my shawl from the back seat of his car, the glove box popped open, and there they were, 5 shiny, mocking wrappers that didn't belong in a 70-year-old man's car. At first, I thought I was imagining things. Maybe they were David's, maybe left behind somehow. But then I saw it, that lipstick stain on the leather seat. Bright, brazen, undeniable. The ground beneath me felt like it gave way. Later, when I called my sister Linda, her voice was tight with something I couldn't name. "Carol, I've had a feeling about Robert for a while. The way he lingers after church, the way he takes those late drives. I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want to hurt you." Her words sank like stones. That night, I sat alone in my bedroom, staring at the framed photo of our wedding day. I remembered the lace veil Mama had sewn for me, the way Robert had slipped the ring on my finger with hands that trembled. I had believed him then when he whispered, "Forever." Now, 45 years later, I realized forever had an expiration date. I decided I wouldn't be the passive, betrayed wife who quietly suffered. I deserved answers. The first time I followed him, it was under the pretense of forgetting my purse at home. Robert thought he was heading off alone, but I tailed him as discreetly as I could. He didn't go to the lake. He drove to the country club, parked near the golf course, and met someone at the edge of the lot. From a distance, I couldn't see her face, but the way he leaned close, the way he laughed, it wasn't the laugh he saved for me anymore. The second time was worse. He said he was running errands, but I trailed him again, heart hammering. He ended up at a mall in Buckhead, slipping into Nordstrom like a man half his age. I parked and waited. When he emerged, she was beside him. Tall, elegant, her hair a glossy chestnut. She rested her hand on his arm as naturally as if she had done it for years, and then, God help me, I saw him bend down and kiss her. Her name, I would later learn, was Victoria Vance, wife of Dr. Lawrence Vance, a renowned cosmetic surgeon with a mansion not far from where we lived. She wasn't some fling. She wasn't some fleeting midlife distraction. She was established, wealthy, and she had my husband in her grip. I sat in my car that night, shaking. My heart throbbed with betrayal. But what burned deeper was the humiliation. How long had people known? How many had whispered behind my back while smiling to my face? When Sunday came, I watched Robert sit straight-backed in church, nodding solemnly at Reverend Evan's sermon on fidelity and devotion. I wanted to scream. Do you see this man? Do you see the liar nodding along as though he embodies righteousness? But instead, I stayed quiet. For now. It was Diane, my old friend from the church committee, who finally tipped me over. We were cleaning up after a luncheon when she leaned in and whispered, "Carol, I don't want to meddle, but I saw Bob with Victoria the other day. They didn't look like just friends." That was the moment the fragile pieces of denial inside me shattered. I hired Jasmine Taylor, a private investigator recommended by Linda's neighbor. Jasmine was brisk, efficient, no nonsense. She carried a camera with the precision of a soldier. Within 2 weeks, she handed me a folder thick with photos and receipts. Robert and Victoria slipping into a hotel. Robert withdrawing cash at odd hours. Robert sending wire transfers, $30,000 tucked away in a secret account. And then the final blow, a one-way ticket to the Cayman Islands, booked in his name. But the worst wasn't in the numbers or the photos. It was the email Jasmine recovered from an unsecured account. There, in cold black letters, Robert had written to Victoria, "I can't wait to be free of that old baggage. Cayman will be paradise with you." Old baggage. That's what I had become to him after decades of sacrifice. I closed the folder with hands that shook, my tears hot with rage. The humiliation had reached its peak, but something new began to rise in me. Resolve. I wouldn't cry on my kitchen floor like some abandoned relic. No. Robert wanted freedom, paradise, escape. He would get none of it. I would turn his greatest day into his worst nightmare. Because just a week from then, Beverly Jones, my neighbor, had been helping me plan a surprise anniversary party. 45 years, a milestone the whole community was eager to celebrate. But instead of a tribute to Robert's loyalty, it would be the stage for his downfall, and I would be the one to pull the curtain. Before we go deeper into this storm of betrayal and revenge, let me pause for a moment. Before we dive into today's dramatic story, make sure you subscribe to Tangled Heart Stories and hit that notification bell. Here, you'll always find tales of sacrifice, betrayal, and the twists that no one sees coming. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. Who knows, the next story might echo your own experience. Now, back to the night I decided to fight for my dignity. If it were you, if you found 5 condoms in your husband's car after 45 years of marriage, would you confront him directly, or would you wait and watch? Because I chose to wait and to watch. And what I saw turned me from a wife into a woman ready for war. Robert had always prided himself on appearances. To the neighbors, he was the gentleman who waved while mowing the lawn, the man who never missed Sunday service, the husband who held my arm like I was still his bride. But behind those gestures lay a hollowness I hadn't wanted to see. Once I knew the truth, every small detail seemed like a mask. The way he'd linger too long outside after taking out the trash. The late nights with the excuse of finishing paperwork. The overly sweet compliments at church, as if rehearsed for an audience. It was the duality that cut deepest. Because while he nodded piously at Reverend Evan's sermons about loyalty, he was already planning his escape to paradise with Victoria. I started keeping my own journal, not to record grief, but evidence. Times, dates, places. Linda came over one afternoon, found me hunched at the dining table, pen scratching furiously. She rested her hand on my shoulder. "Carol," she whispered, "I know you want justice, but don't let this poison you." I looked up at her. "Linda, I've spent my life holding this family together, sewing David's costumes, balancing Bob's bills, smiling when I wanted to cry. If I stay quiet now, I become exactly what he called me, baggage. Her eyes softened, but she didn't argue. She knew I'd already crossed a threshold. One evening, Robert came home late, his shirt half untucked, his cologne lingering like a foreign scent. He kissed my cheek, perfunctory, and I tasted bitterness. Not from him, but from myself. I wanted to scream, "Do you think I don't know? Do you think I'm blind?" But instead, I poured him tea, listened to his story about a tough round at the golf course, and nodded. Inside, I was memorizing every lie. A few days later, Jasmine called. Her voice was steady, but I heard the undercurrent of disgust. "Carol, I've got more for you. Not just photos this time. It's correspondence." She met me at a quiet cafe downtown. Sliding the envelope across, she tapped her nails against the table. "Brace yourself." I pulled out the printouts. There it was, the line that would be etched into my bones. "Once we're in Cayman, we'll never have to look back. Carol is old baggage. I should have left her years ago." I clutched the paper until my knuckles went white. Jasmine reached across, covering my hand. "You're not baggage. You're the anchor he's too cowardly to appreciate." Her words steadied me, but only just. I drove home that night and parked in the driveway, staring at the house I had poured decades into. I remembered repainting the shutters myself one summer, patching David's baseball hole in the garage wall, sewing curtains when money was tight. Every memory smelled of sacrifice. And now Robert wanted to walk away with $30,000. My sacrifices converted into his ticket to another life. Tears blurred my vision, but beneath them, a flame caught. That weekend, Beverly invited me to brunch. She was the kind of neighbor who could turn scrambled eggs into a therapy session. Over coffee, I told her bits, not the whole storm, but enough. She gasped, "Carol, that man doesn't deserve you, but you know what? His day will come." And then she leaned in, whispering, "Speaking of days, the anniversary. You still want me to keep the guest list growing?" 40 confirmed so far. Her words landed like fate. The party, the perfect stage. "Yes," I said slowly. "Keep it going. In fact, add Reverend Evans, and maybe even Diane. Everyone should be there." Bev smiled, though she didn't know the storm I was planning to unleash. Meanwhile, Robert kept weaving his facade. One night, I heard him on the phone in the garage. His tone was soft, the way he used to sound with me when we were young. "Soon, darling. Soon." I pressed my ear against the door, every syllable a knife. He emerged minutes later, feigning fatigue. "Long day, Carol. I'm beat." I studied his face, lines I once loved now etched with betrayal. "Rest well, Bob," I whispered. My tone was calm, but in my heart the countdown had begun. I went to see Reverend Evans under the guise of asking for prayer. Sitting in his office, the scent of old hymnals thick in the air, I shared just enough. Not names, not specifics, but the ache of betrayal. He folded his hands. "Marriage is sacred, Carol, but so is your dignity. The Lord doesn't ask you to carry dishonor." His words were a balm, but also a confirmation. I wasn't wrong to fight back. Days blurred into a quiet storm. I still cooked Robert's meals, still folded his shirts, but every gesture had shifted. No longer acts of devotion, but part of my preparation. Like a soldier cleaning weapons before battle, I began slipping tiny doses of laxatives into his food, careful and subtle. Not to cripple him yet, but to test how easily he consumed without suspicion. He never noticed. Each night, I wrote in my journal, "One step closer." David visited one evening, bringing takeout. He chatted with his father about baseball, politics, trivial things. I watched them, my heart aching. Did David know? Did he sense the cracks? When Robert stepped out to answer a call, David turned to me. "Mom, you look tired. You okay?" I forced a smile. "Just a lot on my mind, honey." I wanted to tell him, to scream the truth, but I couldn't. Not yet. The timing had to be perfect. By now the pieces were set. Jasmine's evidence, Robert's arrogance, the anniversary party on the horizon. But I wanted more than exposure. I wanted him to feel the sting of humiliation he had so carelessly carved into me. So I planned 2 strikes. First, the physical, timing the final, harsher dose for the night of the party. Enough to make him falter in front of everyone. Second, the psychological, the poster. Jasmine had blown up the clearest photos. Robert and Victoria kissing outside a hotel, his hand clutching hers like a lover. And the email. Oh, the email would be read aloud. His words would hang in the air for every neighbor, every church member, even Reverend Evans to hear. On the eve of the party, I stood in the kitchen again, the same spot where I had first stared at those 5 mocking rappers. Only now, I wasn't the same woman. I wasn't baggage. I was a storm. But here's what I haven't told you yet. Robert wasn't the only one with secrets. Because Victoria's husband, Dr. Lawrence Vance, had reached out, Jasmine had given him a discreet call, slipping hints of his wife's betrayal. And now he wanted to meet me. When we sat across from each other in a quiet diner, his face pale but resolute, he said, "If you're planning something, Carol, count me in. She's torn my life apart too." That was when I realized I wasn't just staging a private revenge. I was about to light a fire that would burn through both their lies. If you were me, would you join forces with the betrayed husband of the mistress? Or would you keep your plan solitary? Because I had a choice. And whichever path I chose, the anniversary party would no longer be just a celebration. It would be an execution. The night before the party, I sat at my desk, staring at the folder of evidence Jasmine had given me. The photos of Robert with Victoria, the wire transfers, the ticket to Cayman. Each page was a blade that cut deeper into the fabric of 45 years. Yet, as I turned the pages, I no longer felt only grief. A strange calm had taken over me. It was the calm before a storm, the kind sailors sense when the sea goes eerily still. On the corner of the desk sat another envelope, this one smaller, thinner, and far more personal. It was a note from Dr. Lawrence Vance. His handwriting was neat, measured, but his words carried the weight of betrayal. "She mocked me, Carol. In my own home, she laughed at me behind my back. I know what she's done with your husband. Let me know how I can help. My silence is not loyalty anymore." I ran my fingers over the ink. It struck me then that betrayal has no gender, no age. Lawrence and I, 2 people bound by vows that had been trampled on, were now bound by something darker. Truth. The next morning, Beverly stopped by to finalize the last details of the party. She bustled into the kitchen, her cheerful energy filling the air. "Carol, you won't believe it. We have nearly 50 confirmed now. Reverend Evans, Diane, even some folks from the old choir are coming. It's going to be the event of the year." I smiled faintly. "Yes, Bev, an event they'll never forget." She paused, sensing something in my tone, but didn't press. Sometimes, even the closest friends know when not to ask. Robert strolled in later that afternoon, humming under his breath. He looked younger somehow, lighter, as if the weight of our shared life no longer pressed on his shoulders. "Big day tomorrow," he said, grabbing a beer from the fridge. "Yes," I replied softly, watching him from across the room. "A very big day." He didn't notice the double meaning. Or maybe he was too wrapped up in his own fantasy of Cayman beaches and Victoria's painted smile. That evening, I met Lawrence again. We sat in the parking lot behind a small diner, the kind where secrets felt safer. "I have something you might need," he said, sliding a flash drive across the table. "It's their messages. I had a private investigator track Victoria's phone. She wasn't careful." I hesitated, then took it. My heart pounded as I opened the files later at home. There it was, a string of messages dripping with arrogance. "Don't worry, love. Carol's too old, too naive. She'll never see it coming. Lawrence? He's nothing without me. Soon we'll have everything we need." Reading those words ignited something primal in me. It wasn't just about my humiliation anymore. It was about every woman who had ever been discarded, mocked, written off as baggage. This wasn't only my fight. It was symbolic. I thought of David, of the son who still saw his father as a pillar. My chest ached at the thought of his disappointment. Would he hate me for tearing down the illusion, or would he stand with me once he knew the truth? That question haunted me as I prepared the slideshow for the party. The beginning would be sweet. Photos of our wedding, of David's first birthday, of Christmas mornings where Robert and I smiled like we had the world. But halfway through, the sweetness would rot. The images would shift. The truth would flash across the screen. Robert and Victoria, hand in hand, lips pressed together, his betrayal immortalized in pixels. It would be undeniable. The morning of the anniversary, I brewed coffee the way I always did. Robert shuffled into the kitchen, half asleep, and kissed my cheek absent-mindedly. He didn't notice the faint bitterness in his mug, the extra dose I had slipped in. He drank, oblivious, humming an old tune. I watched him, and for a fleeting moment, I felt the ghost of what we used to have. A young man with dreams, a husband who once looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. That man was long gone, replaced by someone colder, greedier. I set down my cup, steadying myself. "Don't falter now, Carol. Justice demands courage." By noon, Beverly arrived to help set up. The hall buzzed with life, tables draped in white, flowers lining the stage, the cake towering in the corner. But at the center of it all was the projector, ready for the slideshow that would turn the celebration into reckoning. As we arranged the chairs, Beverly nudged me. "You look calm, almost too calm." "What's your secret?" I met her eyes and said quietly, "Sometimes calm is just the surface. Underneath, a storm is waiting." She laughed, not realizing how true my words were. Robert dressed meticulously that afternoon. A crisp suit, polished shoes, the tie I had bought him on our 30th anniversary. He looked in the mirror and adjusted his collar, pride shining in his eyes. "You look handsome," I said softly. He winked. "Still got it, don't I?" I smiled, though inside I wanted to scream. "Yes, you still have it. The arrogance, the deceit, the gall." But soon everyone would see. As the first guests arrived, I slipped into the kitchen, clutching my phone. Lawrence's message buzzed on the screen. "I'm here, back corner." I glanced toward the crowd, spotting him in the shadows. He gave me a small nod. The solidarity in that simple gesture steadied me. The room filled quickly, neighbors laughing, Reverend Evans shaking hands, Diane waving from across the room. David arrived with a warm hug, his eyes shining with pride. 45 years, Mom. You and Dad are amazing." My heart clenched. He didn't know. Not yet. But by the end of the night, he would. The microphone crackled as Beverly welcomed everyone. "Tonight, we celebrate Robert and Carol, a couple whose love has inspired us all." Polite applause filled the room. I forced a smile, my palms slick with sweat. Robert took the stage briefly, basking in the attention. Thank you, everyone. Carol and I, we've had a wonderful life together. The hypocrisy burned my ears, and as he spoke, I whispered silently to myself, enjoy your moment, Bob, because soon the mask will fall. The lights dimmed, the projector hummed a life. The first slides were sweet. Our wedding kiss, our honeymoon, David in his stroller, family dinners, Christmas trees. Guests cooed, clapped, sighed at the nostalgia. Robert squeezed my hand, smug. Then, halfway through, the images shifted. The audience gasped as the photos changed to hotel doorways, clandestine embraces, Robert and Victoria's lips locked in betrayal. Murmurs spread like wildfire. What is this? Reverend Evans muttered, his face pale. I stood, walking toward the stage. My heels echoed against the floor, each step measured. Robert's smile faltered. I took the microphone. My husband, I began, my voice trembling but steadying with each word, calls me old baggage. He planned to leave me, after 45 years, with $30,000 hidden away and a ticket to Cayman. Gasps filled the hall. Someone dropped a glass. I lifted the email printout, my hands high. His words, not mine. Old baggage. That's what I became after dedicating my life to this man. Robert's face turned ashen, his mouth opening, closing, searching for a lie. But there were no lies left strong enough to cover the truth. And then, right on cue, he staggered. The laxatives had taken hold, subtle at first, then unmistakable. He clutched his stomach, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. Guests whispered, shocked, confused. I looked at him, my eyes cold. This is what betrayal looks like. Weak, pathetic, exposed. The room was silent except for Robert's labored breathing, and then David's voice cut through. Dad, is this true? Robert's lips quivered, but no sound came. His hand pressed against his gut, his face drenched in sweat. The murmurs in the room swelled into a storm of whispers. I could hear the disbelief, the pity, the disgust rippling across the crowd. Reverend Evans rose from his chair, his expression stricken. Robert, tell me this isn't true. But Robert's eyes darted helplessly between me, the screen, and the stunned faces of our neighbors. His mouth opened once more, yet only a strangled groan escaped. The mighty man who once strutted like a pillar of faith and family was crumbling before them all. The slideshow ended, the screen frozen on a damning image. Robert kissing Victoria in the glow of a hotel sign. I turned to the crowd, the microphone heavy in my hand, but my voice steady. For years, we were called the model couple. For years, I smiled while he played the role of faithful husband. And all the while, he was mocking me, mocking all of you. He planned to abandon me, with your admiration still fresh on his lips, and vanished to Cayman with her. Gasps filled the air again. A woman near the back muttered, Victoria Vance? And the whispers surged, names passing like fire in dry grass. I locked eyes with Lawrence in the corner. He nodded once. A silent acknowledgement that this wasn't just my fight anymore. Robert stumbled toward me, his voice raw. Carol, please, we can talk about this. Talk? I cut him off, my words sharp as glass. You had years to talk. Instead, you gave your words to her. You gave our money to her. You gave our life to her. The silence afterward was suffocating. Then, with the weight of decades behind me, I delivered the line I had rehearsed in the solitude of my nights. You called me baggage. Tonight, you carry the weight of your own disgrace. The crowd erupted. Some gasped in shock. Others murmured prayers, but many shook their heads. Angered at the hypocrisy they had just witnessed, David pushed through the crowd, his face pale, his voice trembling. "Dad, just tell me. Is it true?" Robert reached for him, but David recoiled. "Don't," his voice cracked. "Don't touch me. You're not the man I thought you were." My son's words struck harder than mine ever could. Robert's shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow. This was no longer just about betrayal between husband and wife. This was about a father losing the respect of his only son. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only Robert could hear. "You thought you could humiliate me quietly, behind closed doors. Tonight, your humiliation is public, and it is final." He groaned again, the medicine tightening its grip, and stumbled toward the restroom. But the crowd parted with contempt, their faces cold. "Go on," someone whispered. "Run." Victoria was not present, but her shadow loomed large. Guests buzzed with her name, the scandal stretching beyond these walls. And soon, Lawrence would play his part. At the edge of the stage, I lifted a smaller poster board. It was the email, blown up in bold letters. The words "old baggage" loomed across the room, larger than life. "Look at this," I said, my voice cracking. "After decades of sacrifice, this is what I became to him, old baggage." The murmurs turned to outrage. Some women dabbed tears from their eyes. A man in the back shook his head. 45 years and this? Shameful. Lawrence finally stepped forward, his voice deep and clear. And while he mocked Carol, Victoria mocked me. She thought I'd never find out, but I did. And tonight, so did you. The revelation hit like another thunderclap. Suddenly, the affair wasn't just whispered suspicion. It was a web of betrayal that touched two families. Robert, pale and sweating, slumped into a chair. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. Reverend Evans spoke again, his tone sorrowful. "Carol, my dear, you did not deserve this. No woman deserves this." His voice carried authority, and with it, the weight of communal judgment. For the first time in decades, I felt the tide shift. For so long, I had been the silent, supportive wife. Tonight, I was the one standing, the one speaking truth. The guests began to leave, shaken and murmuring. Diane came to me, tears in her eyes. "You were brave, Carol. Braver than most." Beverly squeezed my hand. "You gave him what he deserved." David hugged me tightly, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I didn't know." I stroked his hair, whispering, "You weren't supposed to know, but now you do. And now we move forward." Robert staggered out of the hall, clutching his stomach, his dignity in tatters. A friend called him a cab. He didn't look back. I watched him go, the echo of his footsteps fading. The man I had loved for most of my life was gone, or perhaps he had been gone long ago, and I was only now seeing clearly. Later, as the hall emptied, I stood alone in the glow of the projector's light, staring at the frozen image of his betrayal. My body trembled, not with fear, but with release. Justice had been served, not by law or by fists, but by truth. That night, as I lay in bed, the silence felt different. Not the silence of loneliness, but the silence of freedom. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for Robert's footsteps, his excuses, his lies. I was waiting for something else entirely. A new beginning. But endings are never neat, are they? Because while Robert had been humiliated, the aftermath was only just beginning. There were legal battles to face, assets to divide, reputations to mend. And I knew Victoria would not go quietly. Still, as I drifted into sleep, I repeated a single truth to myself. I am not baggage. I am the storm that broke his facade. And to you, listening now. If you were in that hall, watching a wife turn her husband's lies into ashes, what would you have done? Would you have clapped in approval or turned away in discomfort? Because sometimes justice doesn't look graceful. Sometimes it looks like a storm. The morning after the party, the air in our neighborhood was thick with whispers. News traveled fast in small towns, and by sunrise, every porch swing creaked with the retelling. Some voices were pitying. Poor Carol, what she endured. Others were sharp with judgment. Robert Johnson, the model husband, I'll never look at him the same way again. I poured my coffee and sat on the porch, listening to the distant sound of lawnmowers and birds. But beneath the everyday hum was a new rhythm, one where I no longer carried his secrets. I was free. Robert didn't come home that night. David told me later he'd taken a taxi to a motel on the edge of town. Victoria never showed up. Perhaps she'd abandoned him the moment her name was dragged into the light. Days passed. The silence of the house was strange at first. After 45 years of hearing Robert's footsteps, the quiet felt foreign, almost hostile. But slowly, it turned into peace. I didn't have to wonder anymore where he was. I didn't have to sniff his shirts or pretend to believe his lies. The silence was honest, and honesty, even in solitude, was sweeter than false companionship. Legal matters came next. With Jasmine's evidence and Lawrence's cooperation, I had all I needed. My lawyer helped me secure the house, part of Robert's pension, and enough to ensure I wouldn't be left destitute. Robert fought, of course. He shouted, cursed, even tried to charm the judge. But the proof was ironclad. When Lawrence himself testified about Victoria's affair and Robert's plans, the court had no sympathy left. The gavel came down, and with it, the final tie that bound me to Robert was cut. David was my anchor through it all. He visited often, bringing groceries, fixing the squeaky door hinges, making me laugh with his dry humor. But I could see the pain in his eyes. Losing respect for a father is its own kind of grief. One evening, we sat on the porch as the sun dipped low. David's voice was quiet. "Mom, I keep thinking, did I miss the signs? Did I ignore things I should have seen?" I shook my head. "You're his son, David. It wasn't your burden to carry, it was his shame to hide." He leaned against me like he did when he was little. "I'm proud of you, Mom. You didn't let him break you." Tears filled my eyes, but this time, they weren't from sorrow. They were from pride. Months slipped into a year. Seasons turned. The hydrangeas bloomed again, and my life took on a new rhythm. I joined an art class at the community center, rediscovering the joy of painting. My brush strokes were clumsy at first, but each canvas felt like a page of healing. I made new friends, women who had their own scars, their own stories of betrayal and survival. Together, we laughed, cried, and reminded one another that none of us was truly alone. And then there was Arthur, a kind man, gentle in spirit, who had lost his wife years ago. We met through the church outreach group, and what began as casual conversations over coffee grew into dinners, walks, and quiet companionship. Arthur never tried to fill Robert's shoes. He simply walked beside me, steady and true. As for Robert, word spread that Victoria had left him. Without money, without dignity, he drifted from one cheap apartment to another. I rarely saw him, though sometimes our paths crossed in town. He looked smaller each time, not just in body, but in spirit. The proud man who once believed he could juggle two lives now shuffled with hollow eyes, carrying the weight of his own choices. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. His downfall was his own doing. One Sunday, Reverend Evans asked me to speak at the women's group. I stood before them, hands trembling, but voice firm. I used to think strength meant silence, I said, that keeping the family together, no matter the cost, was what made me a good wife. But silence only protected betrayal. Strength is naming the truth, even when your voice shakes. The room was quiet, women leaning forward, some with tears brimming. And dignity, I added, is not given, it's claimed. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't public humiliation, though I won't lie, that helped. It's living well afterward, living free. The women applauded softly, some nodding with understanding. And in that moment, I realized my story wasn't just mine anymore. It was a torch, a reminder for anyone who had ever felt discarded. So here I am, telling you this story, not to wallow in the past, but to shine light on what betrayal can teach us. Respect isn't given by blood or by vows. It's earned through love, kindness, and truth. If you're listening and carrying your own secret heartbreak, know this. You are not baggage. You are not invisible. You are not too old to reclaim your dignity. And sometimes, the end of one story is just the beginning of another. Before we close, let me ask you, if you had been in my place, standing on that stage with all those eyes on you, would you have exposed the truth? Or would you have chosen silence to protect the family image? Have you ever witnessed someone being cast aside, called useless, after years of sacrifice? If so, I invite you to share it, because here, in this community, no one suffers alone. If this story touched you, leave a note for yourself in the comments, a reminder of the boundary you'll never let anyone cross again. And don't forget to subscribe to Tangled Heart Stories. Here, you'll find more tales of sacrifice, betrayal, and the unexpected twists that remind us all of one truth. Justice may be delayed, but it always arrives. Together, we keep each other strong.